Jason, when you were starting out in this business, what attitudes did you have that were wrong in terms of how the industry worked or how to conduct yourself in a meeting?
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a saying that youth is wasted on the young. I think what that saying means is that we, especially when we come out of film school or school, we just have this inflated sense of who we are, of how brilliant we are. That is the number one killer of careers that I think that there is, of just having this overinflated sense of what you can do. And I definitely suffered from that, you know, because we all who do this dreamed the big dream. You know, we all watched that movie. There was probably a movie that you saw when you were young and you were like, oh, I can do that. And it's probably true. That's the thing. And then we just start to build this framework of who we are as people. And then you actually get into the world and start to try to work, and nobody looks at you like that, especially because, well, what have you done? You're 20. You know, that really was a blow. Having more of an ego than I deserved, if that makes sense, you know? I think and one of the things that really tripped me up for years, and it still has ripple effects to this day, is that I didn't understand the importance of a mentor. How much time that would have saved me if I had just found someone to tell me what to do, because I had no idea. We're just stumbling around in the dark. Like, how do you get the first job on set? No one told me how to do that. So years had spent trying to figure out even how to get an internship. Like, my God, it's so hard. So being humble enough to just say, please give me some advice, because I'm just want to learn, you know, that kind of thing. So those are both probably fall under the humility umbrella as far as the things that I did wrong. I also think that there is how's the best way to say this? Putting too much importance on, this, I'm going to direct this 2-minute short or whatever, and putting so much importance on it that you end up, it ends up breaking under the pressure, like just getting so wound up and so full of anxiety over this one little opportunity that you have that you end up locking out all other creativity. You become vision locked into something that isn't working. You know, that kind of thing can really kill you.
Because you want it so bad?
Yes, and because you want it so bad and because you want to do it right. And boy, there is a real pressure to the fear of making a mistake. And that is something I wish that I could have understood a lot earlier, is that if I wish someone would have come to me and said, it's all right to mess up sometimes. You know, if you look at some of the greatest moments in cinematic history, they were generally mistakes, you know, or improv lines from an actor, or something didn't go quite right, and that's the thing that's on the film because it just had this real magical to it. When you're putting so much pressure on making it absolutely perfect, and afraid of the mistake, you just kill all your creativity. That's such a dangerous spot to be. I wish someone would have told me that. And I think one of the things I've noticed from filmmakers who are very successful is they have this very simple work ethic that no one taught me, that I wish I had known. And that is, like, for example, I know a couple screenwriters, and their work ethic is almost identical. They have a set time. They get up every day and they do their morning routine, whatever it is, brush their teeth, work out, whatever. Turn off their phones, and for a couple of hours block, they write. write and write and write and write and write. After the end of that little block of time, whatever they've said, usually it's at least an hour or more, they take a break, they take their lunch, they turn their phone back on, they check their Facebook and whatever, and then they turn it off again, and they write and they write and they write and they write and they write, and then they cut it off, and now they're free to relax. I don't think I've ever even heard of that done in any kind of filmmaking class. No one ever said to me, like, you need to be super disciplined and guarded with your time to make sure that you are honing, practicing, working on your craft for set hours every single day. I didn't do that for, man, a long time, years. So, and those years, they slip by, and suddenly it's a decade, and you just aren't getting better. You're stagnating, you're circling the drain. So I wish someone would have mentioned that early on, because it would have also really helped. This is how people, when they break through at young ages, it's because they've been more disciplined about that kind of thing. I'm convinced of that. Where you see them come out of the gate and it's like, dang, how did this guy get so good at 25? Probably because they were more disciplined, very focused on their craft. That means being all alone, probably working on a script, studying, reading without looking at their phones, and all of that kind of stuff. But when you're young and you're thinking about dating or whatever it is, the distractions of life, it really will get in the way of your progress. It'll just make it take a lot longer.
I knew someone who didn't have a cell phone when they first came out because they had such pressure on them to be accountable for certain people that they wanted their time in the car to be uninterrupted. And everyone would go, why doesn't this person have a cell phone? And the person would say, that's my time. When I'm driving, this is before, driving on, this was early on, before it was as taboo as it is now and dangerous. Mm-hmm. But they were just like, no, that's my time. And that's where I'm thinking, that's where I'm doing things I need to do for my day, and I don't want to be disturbed.
I think that's super vital. It's really interesting to me because this is something that I've fought for and simultaneously struggle with, is this idea of I'm going to take from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. and I'm going to work my craft. Oftentimes for me, that's writing something. But the minute I do that, the minute I hit do not disturb on my phone and start hitting keys, my eyes drift over to that phone and I want to see if anyone's messaged me. It is unbelievable. That's called resistance. And it is a sneaky little bastard. Like it's I don't know where it comes. I think it comes from a lot of places for a lot of people, like fear of success, whatever you want to call it, but it is sinister. The self-discipline that it takes to actually go, no, I'm going to take this phone, I'm going to put it in the other room, and I'm going to I'm going to turn off my email, turn off the messages on my laptop, turn off social media, and I'm going to focus on my craft for this 2 straight hours. I actually got an hourglass that has a 1 hour timer on it, and I just flip it over, and I'll watch the sand go through it. Force myself to do it. But every day it's a struggle. Every single day, that resistance thing wants to fight you. But consistently, the people I know who have broken through did that. And they did that for years. And what's crazy is, going back to what I had said at the beginning, they create an enormous volume of work because they're so dedicated. If you're finding yourself where you're working all day long on whatever it is that you're working on, it's probably some sort of day job that you don't love, and then you sit down to write a screenplay that night for like 30 minutes while you're checking Facebook, you're just extending it out. You're just like, you're going to take 30 years to actually get a meeting at that rate. So I think it's important to pay attention to that resistance because it looks like different things to different people.
Also, do some people pleasers? They have the people pleasing disease, mm-hmm. and they want to be able to be there for individuals. Right. They want to be present for friends and family, but there can be demands. So
yeah. This business is. I found that there is this intense amount of anxiety attached to this industry. I think there's a lot of that attached to life in general. This is not just me talking, but if you look at societies worldwide, and the amount of people who feel anxiety, depression, and those kinds of things, there is so many people taking antidepressants, so many people dealing with this, that they find traces of it in the drinking water. And we've seen that. I mean, it's very well known in LA. There's so many people on Prozac or whatever that it's secreted and it ends up, that's why we have to have filters on all our sinks, because it's all in there. Well, what's going on? Why is there so many people so anxious and so stressed out and so depressed? I think that's already there. And then it's exponentially harder in our own industry. And I think that comes from, and I hate this part of our industry, this comes from this place where there is definitely a looking down the nose at certain kinds of projects. So like I'll give you a perfect example. Years ago, I was looking at joining the DGA. And my bread and butter oftentimes is doing commercial corporate stuff. And a lot of that's non-union. But that keeps the lights on, keeps me working. And it's actually great. It can be really great, fun work and fulfilling work. I asked them, so if I go union, can I still do non-union work? And they're like, well, it's probably not a good idea. I'm like, man, I don't know if it's a good idea for me to join at this point, because I can't just stop working. What am I gonna do, go bag groceries until I get a union job? And they said to me, when you decide to take your career seriously, then you go ahead and come on and sign up with us. That right there is exactly what I'm talking about. It's this little bit of arrogance with these projects over here are legit. Marvel movie, whatever high-end music video, Marvel, whatever you have these little category of movies, movies I've heard of or a TV show that I've heard of. These are the legit ones. Everything else over here, if you're making a wedding video or a whatever, like those aren't legit. Those aren't considered. And when people ask you that anxiety-induced question, what are you working on? And the only thing you're working on is a Colgate commercial. It's this flood of anxiety that comes up. Everyone I know struggles with it. They struggle with it, especially when they're not working. When you're going to that event or even to a friend's house, because you know that the question is inevitably coming, what are you working on? And if you haven't been working, what are you going to say? Like, it is so, it just fuels us all. And even people I know who work a lot struggle with the same thing. And I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what that is and how to work with it. And I do think there are ways to fight it. I think the number one thing is changing your relationship to anxiety. Because when we experience it, when it crops up, we see it as a negative, right? It doesn't feel comfortable. There is a method that I've heard, that I've practiced through meditation, called noting. And that means when you feel the negative feeling, or I shouldn't say negative, the feeling of anxiety comes up, vroom, to take 1 second and step back from it and go, okay, I'm experiencing anxiety. Is this positive or negative anxiety? Positive, because there is positive anxiety. Positive anxiety would be like, I got this big pitch meeting tomorrow at HBO, or my film's in the contest, I hope I win. Now, that's positive, that's cool. Like, I'm about to screen something, I hope my friends like it. That's exciting, right? That's a good kind of anxiety. And when you're experiencing it and you're taking a second to look at it and go, oh, well, of course I'm on edge because my film's about to screen. That's okay. And it's okay to feel that. There's also negative anxiety, like, why won't anyone hire me? Things like that. Now, when you note these feelings, it's, I think, really vital to not judge it. You are not trying to change it. You are just recognizing it. I'm feeling anxious because rent is due and I haven't been working. Okay, well, you know what? That's a rational fear. That is, of course, who wouldn't feel anxious? There's something about just giving yourself a little permission in some of those cases to just be okay with it. Okay, yeah, this is a real threat. I need a place to live or whatever. Because you don't want to get into the trap of being anxious because you're anxious, because that just does this, right? So noting, like just recognizing it and then changing your relationship to what it is. You can also take a look at it and is this a thinking or feeling kind of, thinking would be rent is due. This is a fact. It's due on the 1st and I don't have it. That's a fact. Feeling is, man, every time it gets cloudy and rainy, I just feel down. Like that's a feeling. So again, you're not changing it. You're just changing your relationship to it when it rears its ugly head and going, oh, it's a negative feeling and it's just a feeling. Okay. Well, you know what? I like hot chocolate. I'm gonna go get one of those and just recognize it for what it is. I'm not gonna try to change it. I'm just gonna be okay with it. I think that's a huge, huge first step of dealing with it. The second thing I would say is that you really need to pay attention to the people that you hang around with, because they say misery loves company, and what that means is when you get into a whiny mood, like finding other people to whine with, there's a lot of power in that, and all it does is it just feeds on itself. It becomes this loop, and you can end up becoming more angry and more frustrated. I would say challenge yourself to be around people who are relentlessly optimistic. Or try to change your group's mindset to, hey, I know we're frustrated that we haven't been working, but what if we just made something ourselves? Fuel some hope into this group that you're in if you can't change your group, right? Or find a different group. I think that's super, super important. The third thing I would say that I think this has been a big one for me is that they say that the number one way to fight feelings of anxiety is to find a community. Anxiety loves it when you're alone. Depressed people, when people commit suicide, they're not in groups. They're by themselves. There's reason for that. One of the best ways is if you're surrounded by people who, especially in an optimistic, positive environment. And I would say that this group shouldn't be filmmakers. Somewhere else. Now, I think, and it's even better if it's active, like something physical, but it can be kickball league or knitting or martial arts or ballroom dance or horseback riding, just some sort of regular community activity where you are plugged into a bigger family of people that's not filmmaking related is so incredibly powerful. I found jiu-jitsu. That was my it really helped me a lot. And because in jiu-jitsu, I took it for self-defense. They say that jiu-jitsu is one of the best martial arts for self-defense. Because in street fights, things generally go to the ground. And when you're on the ground, how do you deal with someone on top of you trying to choke you? So I started getting into that. And here's what happens in my own journey. I'll be anxious about something. Anxiety rears its head. Why didn't I get that job or whatever? I won't want to go. One of my buddies from class will go, dude, bro, you coming? Yeah, I'll be there. I go to class. I'm feeling it. I'm sitting in the car in the parking lot. I should go home and work on that script or whatever. No, the class is starting in 2 minutes. I'll go in. I go in. The minute I hit the mat and some kid is on my back trying to actively choke me, guess what I'm not thinking about anymore? I'm not thinking about the fact that agent never called me back. I'm not thinking about the thing that's due tomorrow. I'm thinking about not getting choked by this animal that's behind me. That is, and when I'm done, and not only is it an amazing physical sport, like you are exhausted by the end, but it's a huge endorphin dump. You're just like, boom, and you're around a whole community of people who are learning a skill, getting better, focusing on something else. They're making their lives better. These are they all have their own interesting and rich lives. You are out of that artist community for just a second, and you're just enjoying some great social time in another group. I come back from that, and I am supercharged when it comes back. Oh, oftentimes I'm on my way home, like, I know what to say to that guy to get him to call me back. Yes, that's what I'm gonna, I'm usually on a huge euphoria high at the end of it. Community, community, community is so important. Like, I would highly recommend, and I know that the first step to do that, it's always hard. They say in jiu-jitsu, the hardest belt to get is the white belt, because it's forcing yourself out of the house into this group of strangers for the first time. But man, please go out and get that done. And finally, I would say if you find yourself dealing with it, there is a lot of comfort in the fact that if you are to make sure that you are working on your craft, continuing to make progress every day. There is a lot of comfort when you get to the end of a year and realize you wrote 3 screenplays that year. That feels really good. Or you took a whole writing class and graduated, or whatever it is like that. If you are not continually getting better and practicing and feeling yourself improve, that feels really good. That can also, because you'll know at the end of the day, at 5 o'clock when you log off and you decide to stop and put writing aside for a minute, you can go play video games in peace because you put in the work. That feels nice. You can relax because you know you did your work for the day. That's a really satisfying feeling.
Did you ever need to use any of the moves in jiu-jitsu in real life?
In real life? Let me think. Interesting story. So in my own journey, I had some very aggressive fathers. So both were bullyish. Both had a lot of street fights. So as a kid, I grew up feeling utterly powerless. This really carried over in a career, by the way. As I would approach people that I was intimidated by, that inner feeling of powerlessness was really strong. And so when I went into jiu-jitsu, I was absolutely terrified. I was essentially finding my own strength. I was taking class for about a year. And a lot of at least the school that I attend is all about self-defense. It's just someone on the street comes up to you and does this. Here's some things you can do at least to keep yourself safe. Anytime I'd ever been in an aggressive situation where it looked like something was standing at a bus stop and someone aggressive was going to come up to me, I'm absolutely terrified and wish I could run away. Right before the very first day of shooting The Abandon, my last feature, I hear a crash downstairs in the house that we're staying in. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I get up out of bed. I'm totally drowsy. My dog is freaking out. I walk downstairs and there's a guy standing in the kitchen. Now, it was the weirdest, most surreal thing because I was still just a very new practitioner of jiu-jitsu. I'm no badass. But it was the first time in my life where I'm faced with a potential aggressive person and I felt peace. Because the way the guy was standing in the kitchen, leaning on the counter, kind of hunched, I thought he was going to rush me. But I'd been practicing what happens when someone rushes you in class for a year. So in that moment, I just looked at him and I thought, okay, well, if he rushes me, that's okay. I know how to deal with this. I can at least keep him from getting to anyone else in the house while they call the police or whatever, and we can get this handled. So in the end, it turns out he was drunk and he found himself in the wrong house. Now, I didn't know this in that first half a second when I saw him in the kitchen. For a couple of minutes there, it was real touch and go. But prior to that, I probably would have grabbed the knife or freaked out or whatever, but it really did, in a very positive way, change. It was a great way to start shooting a movie. To just have that calmness, in the face of that kind of adversity was really great.
And it could be inspiration for your next script. I mean, how bizarre is that someone accidentally goes into the wrong house, but I guess
Right. Well,
they all look the same. I don't know.
When it comes to inspiration for that, I mean, will say that when you when you get involved in some other sport or some other skill, you're increasing your skills in some other way, it really does fuel ideas. Like, if you're whatever, horseback riding class, you're going to be on that horseback riding. You're going to be riding that horse. You're going to be thinking, man, wouldn't it be cool to write a story about someone on a horse who's, or what? It's going to happen. It just will. If you're an artist, that's one of the advantages to doing that. But yeah.
Glad everything was okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.